Do this later can view it. So welcome to those of you listening online as well as those of you in person. My name is Deb Charlesworth and I'm the Assistant Dean of the Graduate School, and I do a lot of work with professional development, orientation, and all sorts of interesting, fun things. And also with me today is Will Cantrell, and I'll let him introduce himself.
I'm an Associate Dean in the Graduate School. I'm also a Professor in Physics. I've been here since 2001. So I've seen 17 winners.
I've been here since '99, so I've seen a few more winters, and then I did 4 as an undergrad, so I can just tack on 4 to all of those numbers. But that is definitely how we start to measure time after a while, is by how many winters we've been in Holden. So today we're going to talk about enhancing and broadening your communication and interview skills. I'm going to be leading a lot of the formal parts of it, and then we're both going to participate in kind of the questions and answers and all that kind of stuff, because it's often very valuable to have multiple perspectives, particularly when we get to talking about interviewing and things like that, because we've both done it from different sides of the table and at different times and at different types of levels of positions as well. It's never too early to start thinking about the next career phase. So how many of you are PhD students? How many master's students? So for our PhDs, how many of you are post-candidacy or in research mode? Okay, so we've got some that are late, some that are early, so we've got all over the place. It's never too early or too late to start. Well, maybe too late might be like the day before your defense. Like that might not be the best time to start thinking about career planning, but certainly, early is good. But we can think about, thinking about what your interests are, what types of things are you trying to accomplish while you're here, what things are you really good at, what do you like to do? Finding out what those things are can be really critical to make sure that the next step is something that you're interested in, and that the things that you do at Michigan Tech help you to get to that next step. Because if you don't identify your gaps and try and figure out where you need to grow, that the graduate school isn't going to accomplish everything that you would like it to. And getting your documents ready, so your CV, your letters, your resumes, and each position is going to have different things available. We're not going to talk too much about the written portions of applications today, but if you're a PhD candidate, most applications will have you do a CV. Most of them will have you do a cover letter. Those are pretty standard, although for an industry position or for a master's student, those might just be a resume instead of a CV. But then there's like a whole bunch of other stuff that they could ask for. A diversity statement, a teaching statement, a research statement, letters of reference, writing samples. I mean, and everyone's going to have a just slightly different one, and they all need to be tailored. So that's something to start to think about in the back of your head. I kept a running CV as I went through grad school. I still do to this day. I just kind of keep adding things in it, and then I'll format it and make it look pretty when it needs to go out somewhere, if that's what it needs to happen. But I always have one that's kind of ready, because you never know when someone's going to ask you for that. And developing your networks. Hopefully, particularly for a PhD student and you're here for more than 2 years, hopefully you're thinking about going to conferences, trying to find those opportunities where you can go and present your work and having people introduce you. A good advisor will take you to a conference and help introduce you to people. But at the very least, you should be able to meet people who are at your poster session or your talk session to make sure you interact with those people. So today we're going to talk about communication skills. So we're going to actually ask you to practice some of that. And since we do have a little bit of a smaller group and I want to make sure that everybody sort of knows everybody, I'd like to start by having everybody in the room introduce themselves. I'm going to keep an eye on the clock, so I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. If anyone starts to too long, I don't want this to be like a 30-minute exposition, because then we won't get to anything else in the group. So I'll keep my eye on the clock and give you a little wave if it's time to move on. But introduce yourself and describe one of your best attributes. So kind of think about this. You're going up to that career fair, you're introducing yourself at your interview, and you want to tell somebody something that's going to be interesting and that's going to make them want to invite you for an interview or get to know you a little bit better. Maybe you're at a conference and introducing yourself. And why don't we, for difference sake, why don't we start in the back of the room? I'll let you guys arm wrestle with who goes first.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm Vishnu, so I'm a master's student here at Michigan Tech. I came last fall, and I've been here for this is my 3rd semester here. To describe one of my best attributes, I would say I adapt to situations faster. So, and I'm pretty much confident, and I would describe myself as a team player. So those are some of my best attributes.
Hi, I'm Vijay Anand. I'm doing my master's in mechanical engineering. Same like him, I came here in fall 17. So this is going to be my second winter. So my specialization is in power plant controls. And my best attribute would be learning on the fly. So I would love to be curious to find something new. I would be very curious to learn that.
My name is Bedad. I'm the 5th-year PhD student. Hopefully I'm going to finish it this year. I don't know. But, yep, my background is mechanical engineering with powertrain. And one of my best attributes is, I can say, time management, especially when the workload is very high. I don't know, even working on the projects or in industry, because I have industry experience. So when the workload is high, I can manage them. That's what I'm proud of it, I can say.
Hi, I'm Mehdi. This is my first semester, and I'm PhD student here in biomedical engineering. And I think our working is a considerable features of me because I try hard to achieve my goal without looking at the different situation around me.
I'm Ali. I'm a new master's student in electrical engineering. I believe I can do things in the teamwork very well, and I can learn everything rapidly. So I think this is my advantage.
Hello, my name is Himanshu. I'm a master's student, and this is my last semester here. I'm doing my master's in electrical engineering, and one of my best attributes I can say I can learn very easily what's going around me, and that gives me a little bit of good kind of you can say good judging, or I can express what people are expecting from me. I can sense what they want from me, so I can do work according to that. I can say I have a best thing.
So I'm Ajitesh. I'm a master's student doing mechanical engineering here. This is my third semester. I have just one more semester after this. To describe one of my best attributes, I feel is I have a really good sense of observation. I mean, I really like to go into the minute details of things, and I have always a curiosity of learning new things every time.
So, hi everyone, my name is Jacob Wojcicki. I am a third-year PhD student in mathematical sciences. I am also serving this year as your graduate student government academic chair. So I work with Dr. Charlesworth and Dr. Cantrell in organizing the professional development workshop series. I like to consider myself as enthusiastic, organized in my work, and try to be as punctual as possible. If this is stuff that you like, or you have any comments, concerns, or questions, let me know. I'm your person for that.
Hello everyone, I'm Jinling Zhang. This is my fifth year's PhD student in physics department. My research mainly focuses on optical property of low-dimensional materials. I do the characterization, simulation, even the fabrication. I built the optical setup for our materials. Yeah, use the setup. I published two papers about this one. Yeah, thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Vishal Mohanan. I'm a master's student in mechanical engineering, and I'm starting off this fall. So this is my first semester. One of my best attributes is adaptability. I believe that any person, if he has to grow as an individual, needs to be subjected to pressure. That is when we really find out who we are. So every time there's a challenging environment, something new, something that I'll have to start from the scratch, that is an environment which I really like to be in, so that at the end of it, I have acquired a new skill. So this is what I look forward to, not just in my career, but in my personal life as well.
Hello everyone, this is Chinmay. I'm first year mechanical engineering master's student at Tech. Prior to coming over here, I had 5 years of work experience, and one of the attitudes that I demonstrated in my day-to-day activities were people management and time management skills, and I consider that as one of the best attributes that I have.
I'm Ray. Actually, I'm in the last year of my PhD. So I think one of the best attributes of mine is I could gather information and make the best one of mine. Since 6 months before, I was kind of struggle, and so about the career. Then I decided to be a data scientist, but I have to learn everything from the scratch. But for now, I have 2 interviews and 2 on-site interview, and maybe I could get an offer from an internship of data scientist. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Asif. This is my 2nd semester. I'm pursuing Master of Science in Electrical Engineering. Last semester, I got to know about some interview techniques from career services, and this career fair, I fortunately got some internship offers, and I'm thankful to the career services and the interview techniques for that. My best attribute, I don't know if it's best or not, I think it's a good attribute, that I think very much forward sometimes. Like sometimes I'm planning what I'm gonna do within next 2 years or 5 years. So that sometimes keeps me awake. Yes, so that's what I think. Thank you.
Do you have a best attribute?
Sure. So I'll read you this from scratch. My name is Will Cantrell. I'm a professor in the Department of Physics, and I don't know if it's my best attribute, but it's one good attribute that I have, that I'm a good teacher.
So my name is Deb Charlesworth. It's a pleasure to meet you today. And one of my best attributes is I always like learning new things. So in my 20s, I learned how to swim. In my 30s, I learned how to tap dance. And I'm learning how to ice skate now. And those are new challenges at every stage of my life. And I enjoy that very much. And so what we did is we introduced ourselves to the group. And of course, you came in late. You saw 3 people. So hopefully we don't put you 2 on the spot here. But we'd like to introduce yourself and describe one of your best attributes in like 30 seconds or less. No question.
My name is Mehdi. I'm from Iran, graduate student, PhD here in Electrical Engineering Department. This is my 4th year. And my best attribute maybe is I'm a good teacher, maybe.
So did you have any observations as we were going through this, or comments that you'd like to make about what you saw or how you felt about doing this, or what you thought? Was it easy to do? It's hard? You look like you could start to say a comment.
I was like, I was used to it, so yeah.
Okay, so you've done this before.
Yeah.
You've had to practice this. Has everyone done something like this before? Okay, good. Was it anyone have challenges with this? Was it?
I was at the other side of the table, so yeah.
You're on the other side of the table. Okay.
So since many of them took turns before me, I think I had time to prepare. But if it was us on the spot, then maybe I might fumble a little bit with my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So any questions that are asked instantaneously, I think it's tough to give an answer.
So being prepared can be helpful, and seeing what everyone else has said can be good. Yeah.
When I was growing up, my parents told me, don't brag. Don't, you're not supposed to say good things about yourself. Let other people say good things about you. But if you're going for a job interview, you better say good things about you, because there's nobody else there to say good things about yourself.
Yeah.
So some of you might know my husband's a faculty member on campus, and he teaches a class where he did the same exercise with his students. And what he had them do, and if we had a full hour, I would probably do this with you, is he actually had each student go to everybody else in the class and introduce themselves in this way. And they all immediately said, this is the dumbest thing ever. Why are you making me do this? But like you pointed out, after listening to everyone and having some time, you came up with a better response. After doing it 20 times, it's going to be a lot more natural too. So if you have a group of friends that you don't feel comfortable asking this to, maybe you could all practice your 30-second introductions, because that is the first thing that people come up and ask. A couple of things I noticed: nobody stood except for us. And maybe that's because we're just used to presenting in front of groups. But I think, sometimes that's appropriate. It may or may not have been for this case, but kind of be aware of what's everyone else doing, and is it a time where, if you're in a big group like this and it's a big interview room, maybe there's a group of people being brought somewhere, you might want to stand so everyone can see you and they know who that person was. And to be assertive, and we're going to talk about some of that. Some of you kind of say, well, I think maybe this is my best attribute. And, be confident. This is your chance to shine. Take a few minutes, and you can all got the slides so you can read these at your leisure, but think about some of your strengths. And these are some just ideas here, but you probably have a lot more than you think of and that you know of. And so kind of, part of reflection and thinking about yourself, like having that moment to think about, well, what are my strengths? What are the things that I want somebody to know about me in a job interview? What are the things that this company wants and needs, or that this university wants and needs? And how, maybe have a mental image in your mind of, these are the 4 things I need to make sure this person hears before I leave the room. So I'm going to kind of make that mental, maybe that's a piece of paper that you have that you bring with you, so you know that the types of things, they may not ask you the questions you're expecting. Usually there's an opportunity at the end to say, hey, is there anything else? And you can kind of look at your list and be like, oh, I forgot to mention that I taught myself how to, program in C++ in a week, or whatever the accomplishment, is. So this is something that I would encourage you to kind of do on your own time there. If you want to be heard, you must project your voice. Probably one of the best things my parents did for me when I was little is I was involved in theater from the age of 10 onward. So I learned some proper breathing techniques. I don't practice them all the time. I'm not the best at it 100%, but I have learned how to project without shouting so that my voice isn't completely done at the end of the day. Although if you talk to me on the second day of orientation, I get a little bit winded by the end of that second day. And at the end of a 3-hour presentation, I am quite, I actually do a 4-hour presentation. That one, at the end of the 4 hours, I'm pretty much done, but I have microphones there too. But using good breathing techniques, so that's breathing from the diaphragm, and you can, Google a lot of these things and find YouTube videos on how to do some of these things. But if you find yourself struggling, if people are always saying, can you speak up? And that's one thing I noticed. Some of you had softer voices, some of you had louder voices. You might have noticed some people were easier or harder to hear. It's not about, your English skills. It's about projecting. It's about making sure someone can hear you and that you're doing that. So these are things to practice and think about. A lot of communication is also body language. Like I said, a lot of you were sitting, a lot of you are, kind of slouched and kind of, more casual. I wasn't I put you all on the spot. I wasn't, saying this is a job interview, and I'm sure you would have all, perked right up if it was, if I said I had a job or a fellowship at the end of the seminar for the best presentation, then you'd probably all have, perked up a little bit more for this. But there's a lot of communication that's nonverbal, and so the eyes, and so looking at the people that you're doing. When I do give presentations, I try really hard to look at everybody in the room at least a couple of times in a sweep or during a slide, so I can make sure that everybody in the room sees that I'm interested and engaged in them. And that can be true, especially in an interview situation as well. Don't just focus on the person asking the question. I mean, make sure if you ask the question, I would definitely make sure I looked at you. But if there's other people in the room, I would, at least kind of share my glance so they're not thinking, oh, they're just ignoring me. I'm important too. I'm part of the room. So tall, open posture. I try and yoga has actually been really helpful. If there's one thing that I can say in my personal life, I've been doing a lot more yoga. There's videos you can get for that online or in the SDC, but this is mountain pose where you stand straight up and you think your head is being pulled with an imaginary string. And those types of things can be very helpful to do that. And so when I remember those things, then I'm like, oh yeah, I need to stand up nice and straight if I start to forget and do this, it doesn't look as good. And so being tall, head up, eye contact, all those things are really important to portray openness and confidence in what you're saying. Gestures that are small or close to the body, hands in pocket. I mean, I almost always have pockets because I like pockets, but I try to not use them in an interview or in a situation where I'm presenting. Eyes avoiding the audience. You've probably always seen someone whose presentation and they're like looking over there at the light switch and you're like, what's so fascinating about the light switch? This has no bearing to the room. Or somebody who's always looking at their notes. I sometimes, particularly with non-native English speakers, you might feel more comfortable having that written out. But again, I would say the practicing, as you brought up to start with, the more you can practice, and I don't want to ever memorize presentations. I very rarely even have notes. I don't know where I'm going next, but I've done this enough. I've done presentations for 25 years at least. And so I'm comfortable. I can kind of wing it. So you're at some level below that, so you're going to need to have some notes. But the more notes you have and the more you refer to them and the more you look at them like this all the time, people are going to go, don't they have confidence? Don't they know what they're presenting about? Standing small. And standing small can also be, if you're just kind of stooped and like this, but standing and hi, welcome to this presentation. I'm so glad you're all here today. Instead of, I'm so glad you're here today. It's really nice to have you. There's a difference in how that projects. So how about this person? What do we think about him?
His hands are in the pockets.
Hands are in the pocket. So what do you think about that?
It's not a very good thing at the presentation.
Nervous?
Nervous? Like, get that impression?
Laid back.
Laid back? Do we like his dress?
Okay.
A little too casual.
Casual approach, yeah.
Depends on the occasion. So if we're going to say these people are going for a job interview, this would be probably not appropriate for almost any job interview that I can think of. Maybe McDonald's.
Skateboard park.
What's that?
Skateboard park.
Skateboard park, yeah. And I've heard that. I mean, my very first job, my second internship out of grad school, between grad school and undergrad, my very first day I wore a suit, and that's what I had worn at my previous employer for my internship. And everybody on like the third week, once I stopped wearing the suits and started wearing khakis and polos, were like, oh my God, thank God. We thought you were like the most uptight person in the world. But, the first day at least they knew I was serious. They knew I was serious. They just were afraid I was going to be boring all summer. They're like, oh God, another stuffed shirt we got to work with. So you have to gauge your audience. But, it can depend on where you're going. If I know I'm giving a presentation, I usually do get the blazer out and get the nice pants. Friday I'll be wearing my tech gear as long as I don't have a big meeting. What do you think of her?
Let's move forward.
She's eager to learn something, to participate.
Says it. Hand open, she's looking for something. Do we ever want to show how frustrated we are? You seen desks like that? Maybe yours looks like that. My desk at home looks like that. Desk at work. What's that?
Unpaid bills.
Unpaid bills.
Every Sunday evening?
Every Sunday evening, that's what it looks like. Okay. But probably, dress is okay, but maybe not the slumped over look. Not the best impression there. Would you hire this guy?
Yeah.
Why not?
Loose and baggy shirts.
Yeah.
Loose.
Loose.
Oh, loose. Okay, loose. Loose. Yeah, I don't.
Not dressed properly.
He's close, isn't he? Though.
Yeah, he.
Just straighten the tie up a little bit. My husband is very British. And he thinks white shirts are the only shirts that are appropriate for interviews. I disagree, but if you see him on a daily basis, he's not really wearing the red shirt, so I'm not quite sure where he gets it. Probably not the best interview hand gesture. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do that, but certainly, you know, with certain gestures, you could potentially be projecting that to the universe. What about pointing?
Big no.
Big no? Why is that a no?
I don't know. I don't like being pointed at.
You don't like being pointed at.
Yeah, it depends on person to person. Like, you know, if you're doing something and
There are some cultures where it's not appropriate at all to point, and so I don't know all those rules, and sometimes we'll have someone in the room who'll say, oh, in my culture this is like completely inappropriate, like you never point at somebody. It's just not something that we do. But I think it's kind of, particularly in an interview, it's sort of a, you know, I would feel a little awkward doing that myself. I don't know where I'm supposed to move that. What do you think about this one?
It's good.
I've heard people say the arms crossed.
yeah, or open to suggestion.
Is not open potentially, but it might depend on the circumstance and what that person's doing. It can also kind of make you feel like you're going small and trying to draw in. So that's something to sort of potentially avoid in most situations. The open arms are more welcoming. I think the one at the beginning was like this. That's kind of like a half open, closed type of thing. So there's just a couple of examples there of some pictures to just kind of put in your head that whatever you're wearing, standing, sitting, whatever you're kind of doing, all of those actions are going to have some kind of an impact on what people think about you. You all had a reaction to each of the photos, and you want to kind of think about, well, what are my actions, words, what is my clothing saying about me and my seriousness about this position and what I'm trying to accomplish here. Really important as well not to use words that undercut your power. These are real common things people do. I mean, we even heard this today, you know, I think it might be my strength. You know, maybe this is something I want to say is good about me. You know, I just like to say something. Just say it. You don't have to just say it. I'd like to say something. You know, it's just this very simple thing. I think you had an example about that one, or that was one that you said earlier. I'm a bit concerned. Just concerned. I might not be right. Well, you might be too. So some of these things are just undercutting. One of the things that I see a lot, and I try to watch for this myself, is particularly when people end things that sound like a question, but they're not a question. And if I was going to say, well, you know, in the back of the room, there's some Gardettos, and we also have some Diet Coke. And, you know, outside, I think it was snowing earlier. You know, and it starts, if you listen to some presentations of your colleagues, particularly when people are giving scientific presentations, I hear it quite a lot. You know, I think maybe this graph says this, and you're like, ooh, it's just, you know, it starts, if you start to hear it and listen for it, it's very annoying.
Yeah, for these kinds of, how you phrase things, just pay attention to what you want to say and say it. Don't say that you'd like to say it or that maybe you'll say it. And I do this with my students all the time, especially when they write. Just say what you're going to say. It can be, right, so there's a balancing act. If you're unsure of something and you want to convey that, that's okay to say, I don't know the answer to this question, but I can give you a good guess. That's better than, well, the answer could be, you know, say you're not sure, and then say, but based on my experience, here's what I would do. You wanna project your confidence, but on the other hand, you don't want to over-project it either. So it is a balancing act.
Yeah. And that's more of those are here. One of the best jobs I actually ever had on campus, I was an undergraduate here at Michigan Tech, and I was a campus tour guide. And so as a tour guide, I mean, I was a mechanical engineering undergraduate. I was active in a lot of different things, but I didn't know everything about campus. I mean, nobody really can. But you get parents and students visiting from all over the state, and mostly the Midwest in particular, and they would just ask all sorts of random questions. What about this and that? And they taught you a lot of facts, and so you had some facts to back things up, but you didn't know everything. And it's like Will was saying. I mean, you want to project confidence and excitement about what you're presenting, but you don't want to oversell it to the point where a family, in our case, if we would oversell Michigan Tech, it's the best engineering school in the world, and you'd be like, well, we're really good. I mean, I don't want to undercut Michigan Tech, but I can think of probably 3 other places that if you're going to look at a top 10 list, we're probably below. Just saying. I mean, we're a really great school, but we're not the best in the universe. That's not who Michigan Tech is. And so if you start to say things like that, then people go, oh, wait a minute, you've oversold this. But then if you go, well, we're pretty good in the Midwest, it's not bad. Well, no, we're better than that too. You've got to kind of find that balance between how do you sell Michigan Tech as the best place for this parent without making it sound like it's better than the schools that they might have heard of already, that they're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you're not, because now they don't listen to anything else you say. If you under or oversell it, they're going to listen to you and go, yeah, she's already said it's not a great university, so why should I go here? Or if she's already said it's a great university, the best one in the universe, and it's not, well, everything she's telling me is an exaggeration. You've got to kind of find that balance there. I mean, these are, this is probably a stupid question. You probably heard that in class, right? Someone raises their hand, this is probably a dumb question. And they're trying to just, sneak it in, but if you got a question, you just ask it. Do you have anything else you want to add to it?
I think these are good examples.
Yeah. So, again, thinking about those word choices, I'm confident instead of I think. I know instead of I hope. Or I believe instead of I feel. I will do something. It's okay to say you'll try, but that just sort of sounds like maybe you won't do it. And try is appropriate if, like, maybe it's not going to get done today. I'll try to do this today, but I'm confident it'll be done by tomorrow. Like, there's places where you can use that, but particularly in interview situations, that's what we're talking about today. I'm certain instead of I'm sure, not sure. But again, if you're not certain about something, you want to make sure that you preface it in a way that's positive. I'm really not sure about the answer to this question, but based on the experience I have and, the 30 experiments I did, I'm pretty confident that this is, the way to go, and this is what we're trying to do. And you've all seen that probably in answering seminar questions. If you've been to a conference or been to seminars on campus, listen to the presenters, listen how they answer the questions, see how you feel about their answers and how they're responding. Some of the worst I always find are when, as students, you're like, well, I don't know the answer to that, but my advisor's right here. And you're like, no. You've just completely and I've seen this happen at a lot of conferences where students are like, deer in headlights, and they're just like completely freaked out, and then they just, advisor, save me. And then the whole presentation, that anything that you impressed upon them is kind of wiped away. So you need to think of yourself as a leader in order to project yourself with confidence. You have to have that inner strength to believe that what you're projecting is what you are. And sometimes you fake it till you make it. Sometimes you're not always confident. Sometimes you're not 100%. Every class I walked into that I taught, I wasn't completely 100% confident about it, but I knew a little more than the students in the room, so I was going to be okay. When I was doing my defense, I was the one who had collected all the data. My advisor knew a lot, and he knew more than me on a wide variety of things, but in terms of the narrowness and the depth that I had gone to on my project, I always knew a little bit more than him about the intricacies of things. He might know the bigger picture, but when it came to actually like, what does this number mean? I knew that. He might know what the whole set meant because he saw the whole project from a different perspective. But projecting that confidence as you're preparing your defenses and presenting your work to others when you're talking about what you've done.
Can I?
Yeah.
So I'll add something here. It's interesting that you bring up the defense. When I was in my office 15 minutes before I went downstairs to my defense, my friend Dorda was in the office with me and she said, "You're not nervous. Why aren't you nervous?" And I said, "Because I know more about this than anybody else in the room." Exactly what you said. My advisor knew almost as much as I did, but the specific parts of the experiments, I knew more than he did. And I was confident of that, and I followed that up with, if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to, I shouldn't be expected to know the answer to it. At which point she called me arrogant. So, but this also goes to, so it's good advice for your defenses. When you go in to defend your research, you should go in with the attitude, I know more about this than anybody else in the room, and if you don't know more about it than anybody else in the room, you probably shouldn't be defending at that point. I would follow that with, for a job interview. The person who is interviewing you, they want you to do something. So you should be confident that you can do, you can help them. You can help them achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve. You should also remember, you're interviewing them. You have something that they need, they want. You should be interviewing them. Can you provide me the environment where I can be successful? And it comes back to this. You have to have the confidence and the mindset that that interview is a two-way street, because it is. And really, so the defense is not quite as much of a two-way street, but the defense is a two-way street too. You're teaching your committee something. You know more about it than they do. So you're imparting your knowledge to them. So, and that'll really help you in terms of projecting that confidence and ability, which will really, people will respect that. They'll respond to it.
I actually had the advice before my defense. I was nervous about it, and I went to a colleague, and they said, "Wow, you know more than everybody else in the room." So I actually had heard that from somebody, and they didn't call me arrogant. They actually helped me bring me up. But those are important things to remember. Gender stereotypes are out there. We have one woman in the room here. Clearly, we are in a male-dominated environment in STEM fields. But as the men in the room should kind of realize, if you haven't figured this out already, if you have a female partner in your life or friend, when things go well, women often think they're lucky. They were in the right place at the right time. They happened to be wearing their lucky blazer that day. The winds were blowing the right way, and on occasion it's been that way for me. I was in the lab one day on a Friday at 4 o'clock. Dr. L walked in and went, "I needed an award winner. Here, you're it." I was the only one left. Now, you could call that lucky. I was the only one left. Got a nice dinner out of it with baked Alaska at the end and a plaque, and everything was nice. But I also was the one in the lab at 4 o'clock on Friday. So it was the hard work that made me lucky. So sometimes it's a combination of that. But there are times in all of our lives where if we have some good fortune, it more often, and all these things are a spectrum, right? You can find women and men on both sides of the spectrum who will feel this way about all sorts of things. But as a whole, women will think if they earn something that maybe there was some luck involved, whereas men will just take credit and go, "Yeah, I was in the lab on Friday, I got this awesome award." I was like, "Wow, I'm lucky." And now I look back at it and I'm like, wait a minute, I was there at 4 o'clock on Friday. And I was the only person left. All the other people had gone home. Why was I still here? And when things go wrong, I still find myself falling into this trap occasionally. Talk myself out of it, and sometimes my husband talks me out of it for me. It's my responsibility. I should have done something. I should have been somewhere else. I should have been doing something. I should have left for work 5 minutes earlier so I didn't get stopped at that light and have the car pull me over. I should have, worn a raincoat and it's raining. It's my fault. And it's, sometimes I just forget to watch the weather. I mean, it's not a big deal, but you take it, women tend to take these things more personally. And men try to focus on external factors. And actually, my husband Paul is reading a book called Mindset right now. I don't know, have you read that book, Mindset? It talks about fixed and open mindset, but one of the examples I used was like John McEnroe. And when he was playing tennis, if he lost a match, he would nearly always blame it on the weather, the judge, the ball, the field, the temperature, the court. And if you look back, he would always blame things on some external force. It wasn't that he wasn't having his best day. It wasn't that the opponent was better than him. It was something else that led to that. And that's a very male kind of characteristic. It tends to be a male characteristic. I don't want to make anyone in the room feel like I'm picking on the guys in the room. But whereas a woman would be like, well, I just didn't play my best today and I was really, not up to par. And if you kind of watch some sports interviews, you might start to see some of that kind of pop up. I will see that sometimes. But there's always examples like Serena Williams at the last Open was, blaming the line coach. But people were offended by that, right? If you saw the headlines about that, they were like, how dare she do that? And they fined her for it and they gave her all sorts of penalties. And John McEnroe was one of the celebrities who came out and went, I did worse than this and never got fined. There's a double standard. Women were expected to be like, okay, judge, you called that wrong. I'm sorry, it was my fault. I'll take responsibility for it. Whereas John McEnroe would be like, he'd break the racket. He'd make all sorts of things. So you can kind of see this in sports in some arenas sometimes, and that's kind of a popular example of that.
Should I be concerned? Because I think the statement goes against my...
Like I said, there's a range of all those things. And I think if you do anything like, have any of you done like the Myers-Briggs test before? The personality indicator or type. And the one way I expressed it once is like you get a score whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. That's like the easy one to know. And everybody is kind of either one or the other at certain times and situations. And there's a scale, right? I'm an introvert by nature because I prefer to be, I like to project, I love to present. I will do this all day. I will do this for 4 hours and I love it. But at the end of the 4 hours, I will go home and I will sit on my couch and put my blankie on and get a book and I will be by myself. That's how I recharge my batteries. I love doing this. It's like, look at me and go, you're not an introvert. You can't possibly be an introvert. Yeah, I'm an introvert. I need time away from people after I've been with people for too long to recharge. But it's like a spectrum.
Yes.
So, in different situations, and I'm kind of more in the middle, whereas some people might be more on the other end, so you're kind of all over. But yeah, it's not a bad thing. None of these things are good or bad, but from your perspective, if you're working with somebody who's always kind of taking it personally, and it happens to be a woman, that might just be part of, you might even take that person aside and go, you know what, this really isn't your fault. And you need to sort of, learn to not take it so personally. Because there's a lot of things in life that we can take way too personally. There are a couple of, and I'll just sort of leave this, there's actually an article here called Power Posing, and you can take a look at this. But research has shown that if you do some simple exercises like hold one of these power poses, some people really hate the one with the feet on the table because it's culturally very insensitive for some cultures. The bottom of feet are not seen and shoes and things. But it's kind of standing. The Superwoman one, like standing like this, is a good one. I remember before the ACT, I took one of those standardized exams for high school. I ran up and down the stairs. I'll kind of jog in place. I'll get the blood rushing. I'll do something to kind of get me moving. And if I'm in an interview situation where I know I've got to do that, I'll kind of start moving around. If you come up to the ballroom before orientation and I practice, and everyone's like, you practice? Haven't you done it like 20 times? Yeah, I still practice. But I'll like run around the room sometimes and I'll like play some loud music and I'll do something to kind of get me moving. So whatever kind of makes you feel powerful and upbeat and engaged would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, I'll just, so it can be a little easy for most of us in the room. And I think now I could say all of us in the room, because I heard you go around the room and everybody here is engineering, physics, something like that. And this seems kind of soft and squishy. This seems social science is like, yeah, this is not really hard data. But think about it. When a performer takes the stage, and this is tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars if you go, out, if you project it out worldwide. People have studied what makes these things work. The star performer never just walks onto the stage. They have a setup, and how do they set themselves up? Watch the baseball playoffs or watch the movie Major League. The relief pitcher comes onto the field and they play this song that gets the whole crowd jazzed up. These things really do make a difference. How you project yourself and how you see yourself. Like, Deb's point of before you make a presentation, before you go into an interview, what do you do beforehand? Do you sit, kind of stub your toe? That's not gonna help. But if when you walk in, you're erect and you're standing straight up and down and your shoulders are back, that will help you project, and it will actually help you convince yourself, yeah, this is where I need to be, and this is what I need to be doing.
I guess my theater background, because we used to always prepare beforehand. We would do tongue twisters, we would do physical exercises, we would do things before the show. There are days if you go to the ice rink, I'll actually wear the costume or dress that I plan to wear for the event, so I can practice in it on the ice, so I can feel it. And so, even wearing that suit to a Sunday dinner, like if you're not used to wearing a suit and you're doing this all the time, I don't have a collar, I don't do collars, if you've got that tie and you're like, oh God, it's too tight, I feel like I'm strangling, get used to it. Feel what it feels like to wear and present yourself in that way, so that when you get to that interview situation, it's not like, be expansive. I think we've kind of covered that quite a lot. Self-promotion, Will's already talked about that. No one else is gonna toot your own horn. You're in the room by yourself usually, and that's a really good analogy for that. Raise your hand and keep it raised. If you're in a seminar room, and don't raise it. I'm guilty of that. I do that all the time. I don't like asking questions. Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg is one of the books that a lot of people recommend as well, particularly for women to lean in. Can we do this? I actually was at a meeting once, and I came into the meeting and was told, well, don't sit at the main table, you go sit in the back because that's where the seats are. And I did that, and the dean actually came up to me afterwards and she said, don't you ever do that again. And I'm like, I went where I was told. She goes, you sit at the table. You're in the room. You come and you sit at that table. I'm like, but there wasn't. They would have made room. You make room for yourself. But I was told to sit there, so I did what I was told. So I'd like to do now is we've all introduced ourselves to the groups once. Why don't we all stand up, find somebody in the room to reintroduce yourself as little pairs to. So stand up a little bit, practice some voice techniques, and see what you feel about that. So stand up and find someone. Or a couple someones. Yeah.
Okay. Try the people on the same side of the table as you.
My name is Manshu Barabataya. I'm a master student
Also, I like Python, so I use a lot of Python.
Yeah, this is my last
I really use Sorry? Yeah, sure. Yeah, applied math. So this summer I'm thinking I make a shift from very academic research around the industry. So start from scratch and after that, in the middle of the summer I will
I like to ski, but like I have like an
abstract background.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, already starting. I don't want to already started. I already got it. So I don't I got one the day before yesterday. I just got back from Detroit.
Yeah, I have played guitar.
It's a program by
one of my hobbies.
Yeah, so just 6 weeks, and for the first 3 weeks we have some like basic national stuff covered, and after that we have some
Okay, let's wrap this up in like 10 seconds. Perfect timing. You need to get a snack or drink a little more. Come on and gather back up again.
Also, just to reiterate, feel free to help yourself to food. Sorry. to
Yes,
hijack the
please, get
presentation.
food. All the sodas are paid for.
Thank you.
Did you notice anything different? Did it feel more comfortable? Did you try something different? I noticed you nodding. You want to say something about that?
Yeah, I'm not that nervous, and maybe talk more about my experience or the shift of my career, sort of like that.
Any other observations about what you might have tried differently or how it felt differently?
Consciously, I was trying to be much more open in my body language, and my voice is different, higher than before.
Okay. How'd that feel?
A whole lot easier now.
Easier. Okay.
More rich information.
Okay, more rich information. Good.
Trying to show more interest, like in the conversation, trying to know more about the person.
And if you don't have friends, which I'm sure you all have some friends, but if you don't have friends that you want to practice this with, like mirrors are good. You can tape yourself now and play it again. I mean, we've all got webcams on our devices that we have. We did this a lot in theater. We would tape monologues, we would tape things, and so I grew up from the age of kind of 10 onward, seeing these sorts of things. And you'll be amazed too at like the verbal tics you find in yourself. I hate watching my thesis videos. I make my students closed caption them because I don't want to watch them again. I don't like the way my voice sounds actually. And I say a lot. I say I try to tone the ums down, but for 4 hours it's hard. It's like you can't. After 3 hours you're like, but that's hopefully something that you found useful. And again, if you have the opportunity, particularly before an interview or before a career fair, to find 5 or 6 people and do it to everybody and make sure everybody gets that elevator pitch, that snappy thing, you're going to find it changes over time. You're going to find that it's much more fluid over time. I used to do the same thing with my presentations for conferences and things. I mean, I would practice them over and over and over again. Particularly that first slide. You want that title slide and that intro slide to really grab attention and get people interested and figure out why you're doing your project. And if they can't figure that out in the first kind of 30 seconds or minute, they don't listen anymore because there's too many presentations at conferences, right? You know, you go see 30 or 40 presentations. You don't kind of get grabbed in that first minute. You're like, yeah, I think I'll use this as a break to check my phone or do something else or just zone out for 5 minutes because it's been a long day and I'm tired, and you want to grab those people. So that's communication part. So do you have any questions kind of about body language, projecting, things to say, that sort of stuff?
All of the conversations, if it's one-sided, I think I have a clear thought process. But often when people keep interrupting you, let's say when you're giving a presentation, how do you gather your thoughts in that case?
I think if it's the same person over and over again and it's really disrupting the flow, I think it's okay to say, you know, that's a really great question, but it's something that we need to have a side conversation, you know, later about that. That would be one tactic. I don't know if you have.
I think for a presentation, what you really want to, and so you can use your slides as your notes essentially. So your slides are telling me this is what I want to say for this particular point in the presentation. Now I have found, and this is partially because I'm not 20-something anymore, my memory is not as good as it used to be. And so I'll be talking to someone and they'll, you know, something that I said will catch their attention and they'll interrupt me. And then we'll talk about that for a minute and they'll say, oh, what were you saying? And I forgot. And that would be really bad in an interview. You don't want to do that in an interview. So I think in that case, what you want to do is just have in your head, what is the main point that I need to make for this particular part of the presentation, so that you have that to come back to. You know, and maybe even like if it's a phone interview, you can even write down a quick note to yourself, make this point. And then if they interrupt you to, you know, ask a clarifying question or something, then you have that, oh, okay, this is what, you know, this is where I need to come back to. But you're right, if it's just you talking, then it's a little easier, because you have the structure and you can just follow it. If people are, you know, pulling this way and that way, it is more difficult. But in some ways, it's also more fun, because then you're having a conversation with them.
And I would say the other thing too is to always have a plan B. If this is a job interview and you're kind of not in a situation where you can say, that's a great question, but let me come back to it later, it might feel rude to do that sometimes. What I would think about is having a plan B. What can you cut short? What is essential? What can you kind of, because the other thing you don't want to do is run over time. You're given a set amount of time. I'm kind of a stickler for time. If you've been to orientation more than once, you know it always ends on time. Because I don't want to tell people you're going to be here till 4:30 and then have them there till 5. We're done by 4:20. That's my goal. If we get to 4:20 and we're not done yet, I'm starting to look at Dr. Paul and doing this. And I'm married to him, so I can do that. You know, he's like, I'm getting the look, and everyone laughs, and you know, we go on. But there's, you know, I'm very cognizant of that. Even for this presentation, like I could talk about all these slides for a lot longer. I could talk a lot, but I knew I wanted to be at this point at 4 o'clock. because I want to get you out of here by 5, because that's what we promised you. And that's my thing, but I have a plan B. What can you cut? What can you shorten? What's not essential, so that if you do find yourself running out of time, you're not kind of scrambling to figure out, well, now how can I make this? Because nobody wants to go over 20 minutes. And nobody wants to see the flying slides either. That would be another option. Yeah.
I think you already answered part of it, but how do you handle a question that you are not sure the answer of? You don't know what the answer would be, especially in the job interviews.
If it's technical, I think you make a guess, and you preface it with as stronger words as you can, with the level of confidence that you feel in it. And sometimes you can say, I'll get back to you. I do that a lot with students now. If students come into my office and say a question, I'm like, I don't know the answer to that right now, but I'm going to find out. Let me take down your information and I'll get back to you. And I think even in a job interview, depending on the circumstance, I mean, if it's a one-on-one conversation with someone and it's a very detailed, pointed question, that's a really great question. I hadn't thought of that. Let me get back to you on that. Could be appropriate. You have to kind of judge that one. I'm going to ask that.
I would say there's two ways that can go. One is it a question that you should know the answer to? And my response to that is know the answers to the questions that you're supposed to know the answers to. And I mean, so for me, when I went into my defense, my attitude was if they asked me a question that I don't know the answer to, I shouldn't be expected to know the answer to it. And I was pretty confident that I was in that situation. I did get asked some questions that I did not know the answer to, one of which I actually probably should have known the answer to. But your response can be, and actually what professors are guaranteed to do during your defense, they will keep asking you questions until you get to, I don't know. That, I promise you that will happen. Especially if I'm ever on your committee. You will. I mean, the goal is...
Everyone's revising their forms right now. Taking them off.
The goal is to push until we find the limit of your knowledge. In a job interview, I think what they want to see how you think on your feet. If you don't know the answer, you can say, I don't know the answer, but here's where I would start looking for it. Here's how I would find the answer. And that response can actually be more important than if you just know the answer.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on, we'll talk about kind of the interview process then. And we've sort of been talking about how these things mostly apply to interviews as we've gone along, but obviously they have some overlap. But having good skills is obviously important. Practicing is important. Finding maybe friends that can be your interviewer or using career services to do some practice interviews is important. For PhDs, they're going to ask you different questions than they will for a master's level candidate. A lot of times for a PhD interview, the ones that I did for industry, the interviews on campus were screening interviews, so they would just kind of ask like a 45-minute interview, kind of the same kinds of questions they'd ask almost anyone. But then when you got to the plant or the site visit, that's when you'd get kind of the seminar and the presentation and all those sorts of opportunities. There are many interview options, definitely more now than ever. Phone interviews are becoming extremely important. Most positions that I've been on search committees for, I think you've had the same experience, almost all of them now we call people up. It's just expensive to fly people, it takes time. Every interview is, 2 full days out of somebody's schedule for the committee and for the person. And nobody really has the time to bring in 10 people to campus. But, from reading a resume and cover letter, you can only kind of learn so much about the person. For a lot of those interviews, part of it is trying to figure out what are the communication skills like. Can we talk to this person? Can we understand them if we're going to put them in front of a classroom or in front of a group of people? It's going to depend on the position, obviously. But then also online is becoming more important. I would say a lot of people still are pretty hesitant to do a lot of online because then that requires having a camera. The committee doesn't usually like to be on camera either. The committee's usually like, oh, I just want to call them and put them on the speakerphone. And, it tends to be like we have a speakerphone, right here. We have web cameras, but that requires somebody to know how to set them up. And it just ends up being more work usually. But you will often see a phone or online as a screening interview first, so don't be surprised at all to have that happen. Again, the practicing is really important. In fact, Michigan Tech has like a handout on our HR page that has 30 pages of interview questions. And we often take those questions and pull from there to get questions for our interviews, particularly phone interviews, because you're just trying to find out some basic stuff. Again, it's going to depend on the position, and maybe you can speak a little bit to this in a little bit. But there are a lot of standard questions, and to be honest, there's a lot of HR and equity type things driving this. All the questions need to be approved by HR. If you pull from the list that they've already given you, you know they'll get approved. So you can kind of like, I want question I-5 and G. I mean, that's literally sometimes what we do is pull from that. But that means there's lots of samples for you. There's lots of things for you to practice from. And a lot of them are very similar, so you can start to get the flavor of those types of things. But being able to have clear, concise answers to some things that are common questions are going to be really important. Know about your potential employers. Be prepared to ask questions. One of my, if I'm on your interview committee, if you don't ask a question, I kind of almost discount the whole candidate. Like if after half an hour you can't think of one thing to ask us, or in your interviewing and in your preparation you couldn't think of one thing that you needed to know, I don't know if I really want you here at Michigan Tech as an employee. That's sort of my, everyone kind of comes into the committee with the thing they look for. You're going to ask the question until they say, I don't know. I'm going to see what questions they ask us. Everybody kind of has a couple of things that they look for, so you're going to find those people on your committee when you're searching for a job. And all these things are things we've already talked about: strong authoritative tone, firm handshake if it's in person.
I think that about covers it for this.
Yeah. So here are a few common interview questions. I think number 2 is probably, that's one that I always ask in every search committee I'm on almost. I want to know that people know where Michigan Tech is actually physically located, that we're not close to Ann Arbor, that it does snow a lot. So why do you want to work here? I mean, I'm not saying it in a negative way, but it's like, what attracts you to Michigan Tech? And if the person says things like, well, I really like the outdoors, and gosh, I love snowmobiling, and I think this area is so beautiful, and I love being close to my family in Wisconsin, then I'm like, you know where we are, you got some stuff going on. And I'm obviously interviewing more often for staff positions at this point. What are you looking for and why? What are you looking for? You should know. I mean, a lot of your resumes, I've looked at some of them when I do like resume blitz. It's like the objective is to find a job. So what kind of job? And why do you want this job? What about this job appeals to you? And that tells the committee a lot of times too, like how well have you read the job description? Particularly if you are looking for a position in industry, they've got a list of requirements. And if you don't kind of tick all the boxes off in terms of the requirements, they can disqualify you because you haven't met a requirement. Everybody's going to meet the requirements. So then if you're the one person who doesn't, they can easily go, oh, that person's disqualified now. You can take them off the list. What will you bring? What are your strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of words about these kinds of questions. For these kinds of questions, kind of like your introduction, practice. If nothing else, go to Walmart, buy yourself a stuffed animal, put it on your dresser, and talk to your stuffed animal. I know that sounds goofy, but actually there's research that shows it'll work. So tell me a little bit about yourself. You don't want to say, well, I'm about 6 feet tall, I'm pretty nice, and I like to fish. So first of all, that's not responsive to the question. That's not what they're really looking for. Also, it's too short. Don't be too short. Don't be too long. Most of the time, so if they're a good interviewer, they will tell you, we have scheduled this interview for 30 minutes. We have scheduled this interview for 45 minutes. So I was on the search committee for the dean in the College of Sciences and Arts last year. And we actually had online interviews. We had Skype interviews. And we told all of the candidates, we have scheduled this interview for 1 hour. We have 10 questions. We will leave some time at the end for you to ask us questions. So now they have, okay, 60 minutes divided by 10, but then I want to leave some time for me to ask questions so I know about how long my total time is. So don't spend half of the time answering the one question. I mean, I can say, tell me a little bit about yourself, and you could tell me your life story. And it would take you 30 minutes, and then we have 10 minutes to finish the rest of the questions, and that's not what you want to do. So you want to give a clear, concise, responsive answer, so it'll take a little bit of time, but don't take too much time.
And I would say, if it's a phone interview in particular, if they don't tell you that, I would ask, well, how much time have we allotted for this?
Yes.
And could you give me a feel for how many questions we have so I can pace myself? Because I think that's a good interviewer will tell you that ahead of time.
And actually, I would ask that before the interview. So usually you're going to be exchanging emails or something like that to set this interview up. We will call you or you will call us at this time. And then if they don't tell you, email them back. How long have we scheduled? How long should I schedule for this interview? Because, I mean, you need to know that too. You got busy schedules. You might have a class. So, you might need to know, okay, I've got 30 minutes here and then I've got a 15-minute break and then I can go to class. Whereas, you don't want to be, oh, sorry, I got to cut this short. I have to meet my advisor in 5 minutes. So, you don't want to do that. So practice the answers to these and say it out loud. I cannot stress this enough. You saw as you did your introductions what changed when you did it the second time, because you heard yourself the first time. Practice these a few times and you will hear yourself make mistakes or, oh, I didn't actually say that as well as I wanted to. I should rephrase it and re-emphasize this other thing. That kind of practice is invaluable. Do it. But don't do it so much that it sounds memorized. But because then it sounds memorized and you're not being, you don't sound genuine.
A couple of other interviews as well. Do you have any? Where else have you applied? Do people ask that? It seems like totally.
I have been asked about that.
Yeah.
Wait, I mean, as an official question, we're discouraged from asking that.
Yeah,
but then in individual, so like for faculty candidates, individual people might ask them that. And you're right, there might be, I mean, companies could ask you because that way they can tell what are you interested in. If you're just applying everywhere.
Yeah. But that's one thing that you will see too is you will often have two phases of the interview. One will be the formal phone interview, the interview with the committee, the interview with the group of people hiring, and then there'll be other opportunities where you're at dinner or where you're in the hallway, and you'll get different sorts of questions then, and those will be the ones that probably aren't vetted. Those will be the, how many kids do you have? Totally inappropriate question to ask in an interview.
Actually, that one's illegal.
Yeah, illegal, completely. So, are you married? Totally illegal to ask you those sorts of questions. Do they still happen? Yes. You need to sort of not answer that. It's sort of where, have you received any advice on those? I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I've had the inappropriate questions.
Yeah, so the advice that I've gotten, so I'm usually on this side of the table now. So the advice that I've gotten is you can't ask that question. However, you can tell everybody, we have great schools in this area, these are the options. So you don't ask them if they have kids, you just tell them, here's what we have. If they have kids, that's great. If they don't have kids, well, it tells them something about the area. But I would say, think about your response to that. If someone asks you, are you married? Or do you have a disability? Or, any of these questions, I mean, you can look up, Google it. What questions are illegal to ask in the United States in a job interview? And it'll come up with, a whole list and discussion. Someone can ask you those kinds of questions. You should decide how you're going to answer them. And it may be if someone asks you if you're married, maybe you don't care. So maybe you just answer it. But you don't have to. You should do a little homework yourself on those kinds of questions.
And I think for some of them too, it becomes a question of, most people will say things about like turning it around and going, I have the skills and are to do the job, my personal life won't, interfere with that. I think it's kind of reassuring because people genuinely are usually trying to be social about it. Some older people in particular, I should say older, but people who don't pay attention to the rules forget. They're like, oh yeah, do you have any kids? I mean, it's just kind of the normal thing, right? You're at a you're at a coffee shop, you meet someone at a bus station. I mean, anytime you meet somebody, that's usually one of the questions you ask. Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a partner? Do you have a spouse? Do you have children? And these are things you ask people in the course of ordinary conversations. I think in general, being completely shocked and offended, and that's an illegal question, like that's not the right answer to that. But to turn it around and to be, I have a personal life, and these things aren't going to interfere. I have all the skills that you need, and yes, I'm married, but I'm completely committed to this position and this job, and really interested in that, and we'll see, personal issues work out later. Yeah.
I have seen in the interview, not in the interview, in the application process, that you have the rights not to answer that, but you are being recommended to waive the right.
Oh.
For example, that one I recall, at the time of applying to Michigan Tech, according to the FERPA Act, I can see the recommendations.
That's the recommendations. Yeah, the recommendations. They always recommend that you
waive the right.
That you waive the right to view it, because then people have the ability to be more honest about their assessment of you. And what I would say for any of your references, we don't really talk about that too much in here, but for any references or people writing letters, I always tell people, ask the person, do you feel that you know me well enough to write a positive recommendation? Yes. Because that gives them a way to say, no, I don't. Or I can't. I don't know enough about you. And that's it's a nice way of asking it. Like, do you feel you know me well enough to write a positive recommendation? Like, well, I've really only known you for a year, and I just don't have enough information to really give you a great recommendation for position X. But let's think about who else might work with you, or these are some things that we might do in the future if in a year or two, if you're still here or we're still in touch. Those are things I recommend you ask anybody. I've had people gotten tanked on job interviews because they called somebody that wasn't on their reference list, or because they had a reference and just give a negative one. I've written negative ones because they asked me like 5 minutes before it was due. And I knew no one else would say yes, so I said yes, but I couldn't write a good letter. So.
Let me reemphasize that. You're going to have, no matter what you're doing, you'll have to have letters of reference. I mean, I've provided letters of reference for faculty positions. I've provided letters of reference for industrial positions, military. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing. They will be asking people who know you to comment, to assess your abilities, usually in writing, sometimes by phone. And when you ask people for the permission to list them as a reference, do not ask them for permission to list them as a reference, because that's not what you want. What you want is a good reference. Ask them if they will provide a good reference for you. And if they say no, you don't want it, so that gives you an out. That gives them an out, and it gives you an out. So I completely agree with that. Ask for what you want.
And there are some people who might recommend you for one position but not another. And so you can have that conversation of, well, I appreciate that you let me know this. Is there any position, you know, are there something that you think I should have looked for? Because maybe they actually know something about you that you don't know yet. Maybe it's like, I won't recommend you for a faculty position at University X because I think it's the wrong fit for you, but University Y I would be happy to, or Industry X versus Industry Y, or whatever that might be. But giving them an out and asking them with enough time so that you can find somebody else if you need to. The only negative ones I've written were the ones where they asked me the day it was due, and I felt poorly for the student. I knew they weren't going to find anybody else, but I'm like, this is not going to be my shining letter. It's very lukewarm and bland.
I wanted to touch on this. This is a really common question, and I say that maybe it's my own bias because we asked a version of this of the candidates who are applying for Dean in the College of Sciences and Arts. And how people respond to this is really telling. Have an answer for this question and practice it. Face the difficult situation and how you handled it. Now, you should practice it in such a way that you come out looking better. So you have a good answer for it. So maybe the difficult situation and how you handled it, maybe you handled it poorly. And that's okay. What I would follow that with is, and what I have learned from that is the following, and it has helped me to improve in subsequent situations in the following ways. But these are the things that people are very likely to ask you. Also keep in mind, these are out there. So now you know that these questions are very likely, you will be asked these questions. If I'm an interviewer, I know that you know that I'm going to ask you this question. And if you don't have an answer for it, if you don't have a good answer for it, it tells me that you haven't done your homework. And there's someone else out there who will have done their homework. And so they're more likely to get the job because they've done the homework to know, oh, I need to have an answer for this question. I also want to re-emphasize Dr. Charlesworth. Any questions you want to ask me. For a phone interview, have a list of questions that you're going to ask. For an in-person interview, actually, it's okay to have a list of questions that you want to ask. Make sure that you remember, you're interviewing them. They want to know that you've done a little bit of research and know enough to ask good questions. Don't ask questions like, where is your company's main office? Don't ask that question. You should know.
How many vacation days do you get? Not
Yeah.
that one. That's yeah.
So, and I mean, and that's it's highly specific to your particular situation. But maybe turn it around. If I was at this company and I was interviewing someone for this position, what is it that I would want them to ask me? What is it that what is it that they need to know about my company that I haven't told them yet? So I guess the takeaway from this entire presentation is be prepared.
Adding to when you answer the question, tell me about a time you faced a difficult situation. Is it more on the personal front or the professional front is what they're looking for?
Usually professional. So in a job interview, if someone asks you, you faced a difficult situation, I would say that the answer, well, my partner of 6 years dumped me and ran off with another person, and I was devastated. That's not a good answer. Now, it may be that the day before I was supposed to take this big exam, my mother suddenly died. And so I had to, I was facing some difficulties in dealing with that, but I was able to arrange, these pieces and fit those things together to, come back and take the exam a week later or whatever it is. I think that would be okay. However, if you have an example from your professional life that would fit that question, that would be the better response.
I think how I can add to that. But yeah, I think, probably 80-20% of professional versus personal. People do want to get to know you a little bit, so dropping a few things here and there that are personal to you can be helpful. But I would focus on the professional. They're looking at your skills. They're looking at that requirements on their job description, and they're looking at how you match those. But sometimes it's about time management, and that could include things that are personal. Trying to manage, school and work and visiting family are all, time management type things that could happen to you.
Yeah, actually, in last interview, I was asked about what is the last time you miss your deadline, and what is the cost and how you handle it. Yeah, it's about time management. So.
Yeah, time management are big. So I think thinking about the systems that you have in place for managing your priorities. Thinking about how you would manage multiple incoming priorities. And I used to think as a student I had a lot, and then I became a faculty member, and then I became an administrator, and it's like exponential each jump up. So it's more and more each level you go.
Referring to the question number 8, should you initiate the words about the salary or negotiation if they had not talked about it?
In the phone interview in the initial stages, no. There should be something in the ad that says that. I would not at that stage. Usually, if it's a concern or something that we want to bring up, we'll let people know, like, this is the range that we have available. We've actually done that at Michigan Tech before we even interview the person. Say, this is the range. Is that something you're comfortable working with? Because if you're not, we're not going to waste anybody's time going through the interview. But for most jobs, I think it's, when someone comes to campus and starts to talk to people, or that on-site visit, there's usually a portion of that interview where you start to kind of talk about benefits and salary at some point. We just did the one for the dean, so.
Well, people interviewing here can look up anybody's salary because it's public information.
Yeah.
So they kind of, if you
doing
go
your
onto,
homework.
if you go onto the MTU subreddit, if you dig back far enough, you'll find a listing of everybody employed on campus and their salaries. We're a public institution. It's public information.
Yeah, you can do it for Michigan, Michigan State, anywhere you want to in the state of Michigan. I don't know if it goes beyond that. They're broader than that.
For companies, it can vary quite dramatically from company to company. And so,
I guess it doesn't like me.
I think maybe you didn't do anything with it for.
I didn't. I'm not blaming myself this time. It's going to take a while to reset. But yeah, I think do your homework. There's plenty of salary survey websites and things. I think it's a question that we have occasionally asked in interviews, what's the salary you're expecting? And you should be prepared with, based on my qualifications and the range in the field, I'm expecting somewhere in this, but it's negotiable, and I'm willing to discuss that with you. And for public universities, for any university position, if you're looking at faculty, you can find the salaries nationwide for public institutions, so then you should be prepared with some listing of here's the faculty that are in my range and in my field. It's going to vary from biology to physics to engineering to humanities and the type of school and the environment, where, all these things are going to play into that factor, so you'll need to kind of be aware of them. If you were to quote salaries from, a Big Ten university at Michigan Tech, would be like, well, we're not a Big Ten university. That's not what we're not Michigan State, as an example.
It's usually at the stage of the job offer. They'll say, so this is what we'll give you, and you can counter offer.
Yes, they I have seen that they send you the letter, accept it or withdraw it. So at that time, there is no way of negotiation. Is there any?
There's still, until you sign the letters, you can negotiate.
Yeah, once you sign it, then you're done.
So they may send you the letter that says, you know, we will employ you at $50,000 per year, and you might say, no, I need at least 60, and that's when you contact them back. I mean, it's like buying a house. You can say, I will give you, you know, $150,000 for this house, and the people who are selling it come back to you. No, we'll not take 150. We want at least 175. And you could take 170. You know, you could, okay, I'll pay 175, or you might go back. Well, I don't want to pay 175, but I'm willing to come up from 150. How about 160? And until you sign, you can negotiate.
And I would say that Career Services offers some workshops on negotiation strategies. That's not something that I know I prepared for today, but I will say that for faculty positions, there's often negotiations not only for salary, but for teaching loads, for resources, for equipment. That's a whole, I mean, we could spend hours talking about that. And even in companies, it might be the case that, you know, maybe salary isn't something they can move on, but maybe they can provide more assistance with moving, or maybe they can provide more assistance with travel to conferences or other professional development opportunities that you want to do. So don't limit yourself to that dollar number for the final paycheck at the end of the day. I guess that would be my only negotiation advice for that. But PhD in particular, they're going to be, if they're offering you a job as a PhD in industry or academia, you've got a special set of skills that meets a need they have. And they want you to be successful, so you need to ask for what you think you'll need to be successful. Otherwise, everyone loses at the end of the day.
But just before you move on to that, that's also part of the negotiation. So what I just told you is true. You should gauge how badly they want you. So, you know, if I'm trying to sell my house and I've had it on the market for 5 years and no one has bought it, then somebody who comes in and says, I will give you, you know, $10,000 less than what you're asking for it, I probably will take it because I'm trying to get rid of it. So if they want you really badly, then you can negotiate more. If they have 10 other people that they could hire, maybe you can't negotiate quite as much. But only you can gauge that. And actually only you know your level of what level of risk you're willing to tolerate.
Yes, it's true. Thank you.
Don't do that. I don't know, there's anything else to be said here. You know, you want to be calm and cool and collected at all times. There may be, you talk about the seminar, people interrupting you, there may be someone in the department who's just plain out and out a jerk and who likes to interrupt everybody, or you weren't their favorite candidate, they wanted somebody else interviewed, and they're going to hold it against that candidate and trying to egg that person on. I haven't seen that happen, but I'm sure it could happen, so I'm just calm, cool, and collected at all times. Phone interviews are kind of tricky. We would recommend, you know, have your resume or CV in clear view. If you've talked about something, you can use it to kind of tick things off, and then at the end, if they say, oh, well, is there anything else that you'd like to say to us, you can kind of look through and go, oh, they didn't ask me about this, and I really think it's important, and I want to make sure that they talk about that and that they know about this skill or ability that I have. And they will, you know, ask questions like we've talked about being prepared. I mean, they may ask you, you know, what was your favorite job? Well, then you can look at your list of 5 and go, oh, this one, you know, but you might forget all 5 of them in the heat of the moment when they're answering the question. And having that in front of you can be really helpful as a memory jogger. Have a short list of your accomplishments. What do you want to come across in the interview? You know, in addition to your resume, are there kind of 5 things you want to highlight? And you might, again, use a highlighter on your resume to say, oh, these 5 things, if they're not asked about, I'm going to make sure that they hear those things. Use a reliable phone line. It's getting trickier now to find hardwired connections. We still have one at my house. Maybe I should rent it out for like phone interviews or something. But there have been a lot of cases where we have the phone interview on the cell phone in the hotel or the airport where you're in the background. And you try not to hold it against the candidate when you hear that, but you also kind of think, if you're arranging this and you've got the time and the space for it, why didn't you find a quiet space? Or why didn't you? And then sometimes it's unavoidable, and you can let the committee know that ahead of time. Look, I'm happy to interview on Friday because that's the day that you've told me you have to do this, but I'm traveling and I'm going to be in an airport. Is that okay? Because if it's not, we can wait till there's a quieter time to do that. But sometimes they're under the gun too, and they need to get that phone interview in so they can clear the next step in the process for them. But being up front when they're doing the scheduling is helpful. There's nothing worse than kind of having that garbled stuff in the background. You're like, oh, we had 3 times available. Couldn't they pick one that was appropriate? And you know in town where the places are that are good and bad for connections. Don't try calling from Lawrence. That's a bad place to call from. And jot things down. Have a pen and paper handy. Make sure, I think you mentioned earlier, writing down those questions, if you've got questions as they come up, jotting down notes and names, people. I used to like to write down the question. As they're talking, I would write the question down so that I could look at it. And don't be afraid to ask, to hear the question again. It's completely appropriate to say, I didn't catch all that, or I want to make sure I caught all that. If you ask that every time, people might start to wonder, but, particularly if it's kind of a longer-winded question, making sure you've got that down. So that's sort of the getting ready for the phone interview, making sure you've got your stuff ready. We have I like headsets a lot. I have a headset at home, a little time life operator. That's probably dating me now. I don't know if they have time life operators anymore. They have a little, thing on the thing, and you got the widget on the ear, the speaker, and the little thing out there. So at home. I'll do that when I call my mom. I'll fold my laundry. I wouldn't recommend folding your laundry during the phone interview, but while you're talking to your mother, she kind of speak slowly, enunciate clearly. They may ask you to repeat things. Hopefully they have a reliable phone connection with the speakerphone, but they might not always. They don't always enunciate clearly when they talk to the phone. So again, if you can't hear something, making sure you ask them to repeat it. Use the person's title if you have it available. Hopefully, again, you've done some homework on who you're going to talk to. Hopefully, they've told you who you're going to talk to, but they may not always. So kind of wing it. You can never go wrong by sort of being too formal. So that's advice. Short and concise. Respect time constraints that we already talked about. A lot of times they'll tell you how long the interview is and how many questions, so you can pace yourself. And if they don't, feel free to ask that again. If you know the time ahead of time. If they don't kind of preface it with there's 10 questions, usually they'll ask at the beginning if you have any questions, make sure you ask, well, gee, just so I can make sure I'm responding an appropriate length of time, do this. There's nothing worse than a phone interview that goes on too long. I've had a couple of them. And that's why I like phone interviews, because then the committee can give little eye signals and be like, then we know in the room that we're all on the same page. Yeah, avoid simple yes and no. That kind of goes for any questions. Have you ever had a difficult challenge that you've overcome? Yes. Could you elaborate? That's really important. Concrete examples wherever possible. Again, relating to the professional experience is going to be more appropriate for pretty much everything. And then also answering the question that was asked. And sometimes they're multi-part, so that can be kind of tricky. But I've been in situations where we're like, could you tell us about your experience with X and Y? And they only speak to one of them. And then you don't know if you should ask if they missed Y or if they just don't have Y, and then you're kind of stuck. And if they run out of time, then there's no way to even clarify that. And if you do need to think, just say that. Nobody wants to think for 6 minutes. So you have to kind of pace yourself a little bit there. But certainly you can think about saying things like, that's a really interesting question. Can I, I just want to have a moment to think about this, make sure I collect my thoughts. And again, that's where having your written down accomplishments, things you want to highlight. You know they're going to ask you about a challenge. You know they're going to ask you about, a difficult situation. You know they're going to ask you about time kind of look through those common interview questions and have those little notes so that those questions kind of flow off. If they ask you if you'd rather be a giraffe or a lion, you might need to think about that one a second. But again, they want a quick answer. And you'll know what there's companies that ask weird questions like that. I wasn't interviewed by any of them, thank goodness. I'm not sure I could ever answer the, do you want to be a giraffe or a lion? Or what's your spirit animal? I don't think those are STEM things, but ask. Phone interviews?
I would be aware of extraneous noise. So if you're in an airport, that's pretty obvious. I've actually had the experience of being on technical support in the airport with this gate has been changed to, blaring off in the background. And it's you would never want to do an interview. But also be aware, so it's not as much a problem on cell phones, but landlines actually breathing. You can hear someone breathing, and it's actually kind of annoying if you're talking to someone on a speakerphone and you hear, you have like Darth Vader. You're interviewing Darth Vader. So just, try to be aware of, like if there's a fan in the background or rustling, try to minimize those kinds of things so that they are not going to have any excuse not to understand you when you're responding to these questions.
I'm going to say to smile. If you talk with a smile, you actually will talk differently than if you're not smiling. And it's, again, one of those things that sounds kind of maybe a little fuzzy and soft, but smile. Maybe you have your teddy bear, got your stuffed animal you're practicing with, put your stuffed animal there. And the other thing is, I forgot about this too, is you will hear there's a lot of pauses in phone interviews. Don't be afraid to be silent in those situations. What a good interviewer will tell you, and you could maybe ask that if they didn't, is they have to take notes as you're writing. And so sometimes you'll talk and you'll have clearly ended your statement, but they'll still be writing, and you can't see that. You don't know that. And so a good interviewer will say, please pardon our silence while we do this. But if you've said your piece and you feel like you've talked long enough, give them 30 seconds or 10 seconds to sort of collect their thoughts. And if it goes on too long, just say, did you need some more information or did you need some more time to take your notes? Because I know that that's part of the process of doing that. So don't be afraid to hear silence from the other end. Hopefully they've explained that process to you. Yeah, look at your teddy bear and smile, and then you'll be all happy. Online interviews are, becoming obviously more common. You've had some experience with that with the dean candidates. We would recommend, a hardwired connection, or really, if you know where a good wireless one is, because you've always used connections there. How many of you Skype home or do something like that to go call home? WhatsApp. Okay, so you probably know where the good connections are and where the bad connections are. Arrange the camera for your eye level. My nephew, when we FaceTime with him, all I see are his nostrils, and it's very annoying. Nostrils and foreheads, like that's all I get. And we'll tell them, we'll be like, I can only see your forehead. And they're like, yeah, so? And I'm like, he's in England, I want to see his face. Again, it's just as serious as an in-person interview. This is one where you're going to want to make sure you're dressed appropriately, dressed in a formality that suits the occasion. You can be like the SNL news anchor. You don't have to have the pants on. You can have the jeans. Probably wearing pants is a good idea, but they don't have to be the fancy ones, but because you should be eye level enough. Dress professionally. Professional environment. So you want to make sure what's in the background doesn't distract. And Hopefully you've got a nice plain wall or a bookshelf or something that's, you know, neutral or professional so that there's not the pile of laundry and dirty dishes in the background. That would be really bad. I think that's fairly obvious. And again, I guess the theme is practice, you know, making sure you've got that technology there. You can ask, can we just have a 5-minute meeting beforehand to just test the connection and make sure that I understand things. Or a lot of connections will come with, you know, the technology to log into their system and test that you've got all the right downloads and things. I always send that out to students who are participating via Zoom for our meetings. You know, here's how you can test. Here's a little help page and stuff. Make sure you go through that with the technology of their choice. Do you have preparation tips?
Just that.
Okay. And I mean, we've all done webinars where like you log in 2 minutes beforehand and it doesn't work and then you're late and then you've missed the whole introduction. And nobody wants to do that. Sign on early, have a backup plan. We've actually, in web meetings in this room, had to bring in laptops because the thing shut down in the middle and you're like, what do we do now? And those are things that sometimes happen. We can only be so prepared sometimes, but you know, sometimes it'll work on the iPad and the laptop. Maybe the laptop's wired and the iPad isn't, but it's your backup. You've got it all set up with the right stuff so that you can do that. Again, speaking directly into the webcam, relax, show your personality. The one nice thing about one of these interviews is that you get to see the other person. So then you can kind of see that, oh, they're writing their paper notes down. And so you have that visual. The phone interview tends to be a little more awkward because you are kind of wondering, like, I finished my answer and they're not saying anything. So maybe I should talk. And then you start talking at the same time they want to start answering the question. And that's minimized a little bit with this, but you also have to kind of always be on and smiling. Whereas with the phone interview, you can kind of take a breath and maybe, you know, wipe your hands or tap on something nervously for a second. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
In many cases, even with the phone interview, you're going to be talking to more than one person. They'll introduce themselves at the beginning. I would say for a phone interview and even for a web interview like this, write the names down. Because I mean, that's a professional courtesy. So they know who you are because they've got your CV or resume in front of you or in front of them. But write their names down so that you have at least an idea, you know, so that you can refer back to it. That will help you, because then you're not like, oh, I forgot, is it, you know, X or Y?
And in this kind of interview too, they're going to see you, so making sure your notes are organized. You're not going to be able to kind of, I mean, you don't want to flip and rifle on the phone interview because you don't want that paper noise, but you might have the ability to maybe have things spread out in a way that in a visual interview, you might want to have things more neatly stacked and available, but not completely spread out. And I have, for most of these, I'll get thank you notes back afterwards. Usually email is fine nowadays. I don't always reply to them because I'm always a little bit unsure if I'm allowed to because of HR. But it is a nice, you know, thank you for your time today. I really appreciated learning more about Michigan Tech and the job opportunities. And you're like, oh, that was nice, you know. And not everybody does that, but I think the ones that do, it's a nice touch afterwards. You might not know all of the emails because they might be at a company they're a little bit harder to find, but you could still email the search chair back and say, you know, it was really a pleasure meeting with your team today, and you know, passing that along to them. So
I can say, having been on a number of committees, that makes a difference.
Yeah, it's a nice professional thing. I've actually gotten some handwritten ones occasionally for on-campus interviews. I think for the preliminary ones, nobody really expects to do a lot. So this is the end of our formal stuff. Are there any other questions that you guys wanted answered that we didn't address? Yes, 6 to 5. Well, hopefully you know the graduate school is on the 4th floor of this building. And my office is on this floor. So if you guys wanted to ever come chat with me about any of this stuff, have any other questions or things that we can help you with, that's certainly what we're here for. We're not just here to enforce rules and process forms. We do like to talk to you guys about a wide variety of things in your life. So please look at us as a resource. Dr. Cantrell has an office in Fisher, and we'll be sharing some time here next semester. So certainly would love to see you guys on the floor for any kind of questions that you have. Thanks for coming today. I hope this was enjoyable and useful.
Thank you.
So just as a quick, sorry.